Dr. Vexithara found the whole exercise tedious. 23 standard cycles of xenopsychological analysis had taught her that organic sentience followed depressingly predictable patterns, and this latest specimen promised nothing more exciting than the usual emotional decay curve. The human female sat motionless in Detention Chamber 7, staring at the polished floor with what the Kethmori would call thousand-yard emptiness, and what the Rillan Empire termed cognitive shutdown phase. Note the classic presentation, Vexithara dictated to her research cluster, mandibles clicking with academic satisfaction. Subject exhibits textbook post-trauma catatonia following the destruction of her vessel. Observe the shoulders, drooped at precisely the angle our models predicted for a bipedal species experiencing catastrophic loss. Her colleague, a floating blob of translucent tissue that preferred the designation Flux 7, pulsed a disagreeable shade of orange. The readings seem inconsistent. Her neural activity doesn't match the passive state you're describing. Flux 7, please. Vexithara's secondary arms gestured dismissively while her primary limbs continued recording. I've studied 17 different mammalian species from this galactic arm. They all follow identical emotional trajectories when faced with overwhelming loss. Initial rage, desperate struggle, gradual acceptance, final submission. The human displayed textbook fury when we first brought her aboard, screaming about vengeance, making threats against the entire hegemony. Quite amusing, actually. The detention chamber's walls were transparent aluminum, a material that had withstood plasma rifles, molecular disruptors, and the legendary acid spit of the corrosive worlds. The human sat on a bench designed for beings twice her size, her legs dangling like a child's, auburn hair falling across her face in what the psychological profiles called defensive positioning. How long since the rage phase concluded? Asked research assistant Thrym, whose species considered emotional outbursts to be a form of mental illness. Precisely 47 standard hours, Vexithara replied. Right on schedule. The data from the Terran colony ships we've processed shows humans maintain aggressive resistance for approximately 2 standard days before psychological collapse. It's remarkably consistent, almost boringly so. The human's head tilted slightly. Just a fraction of a degree, but Flux 7's sensors caught the micro-movement. There it is, Vexithara announced triumphantly. Beginning of responsive behavior return. She's starting to acknowledge her environment again. Within 6 hours, she'll begin asking questions. Within 12, she'll start bargaining. By tomorrow, she'll be fully compliant and ready for processing. Processing into what, exactly? Thrym's translator conveyed genuine curiosity alongside the words. Oh, the usual. Labor allocation, genetic sampling, cultural, documentation before termination. The hegemony's expansion protocols are quite thorough. Vexithara made another note. Though I must say, humans are proving disappointingly standard. We expected more creativity from a species that achieved interstellar travel independently. The human's eyes moved. Not her head, just her eyes, tracking slowly across the detention chamber's ceiling. She appeared to be studying the ventilation grills, the lighting fixtures, the barely visible sensor nodes embedded in the walls. Fascinating, murmured Vexithara. Environmental assessment behavior, another predicted phase. She's unconsciously cataloging escape routes, a primitive survival instinct even though escape is obviously impossible. Obviously, Thrym agreed, though his tone suggested he found nothing obvious about any of this. The detention block housed 43 chambers, each occupied by specimens from the human colony ship Meridian's Hope. The hegemony had perfected this process. Identify primitive civilizations attempting to spread beyond their home systems, intercept their colonial expeditions, harvest biological and cultural data, then eliminate potential competition for resources. efficient, practical, thoroughly tested across thousands of species. The psychological profiles from Terra's data streams were quite helpful, Vexithara continued, warming to her favorite subject. Humans experience what they call righteous anger when witnessing injustice, but it's an unsustainable emotional state. Their own literature describes it perfectly. Rage burns bright but brief. Once that initial fire dies down, they become remarkably docile. The human stood up. The movement was so sudden that Flux 7 actually shifted colors from orange to alarmed purple. The human stalked to the transparent wall and placed both palms against it, staring directly at Vexithara. "Oh, excellent!" Vexithara's excitement was palpable. "Direct engagement. This is the transition phase I was describing. Watch how she—" The human spoke. Her voice, transmitted through the chamber's communication system, was quiet, steady, and utterly devoid of the desperation Vexithara's models predicted. "I've been listening to your little academic circle jerk for 2 days," the human said conversationally. "And I have to say, your research methodology is impressively sloppy. Thrim's species didn't possess the equivalent of eyebrows, but his translator somehow managed to convey the concept of raised ones anyway." She understands our language?" "Of course she understands," the human continued, as if Thrym had asked about basic arithmetic. "You've been broadcasting on 17 different frequencies, using translation matrices that any first-year linguistics student could crack. Did you think we were stupid?" Vexithara felt the first twinge of something that might have been doubt. Had her species evolved the capacity for such self-destructive emotions? "Impossible. The translation barriers alone would be insurmountable if we hadn't spent the last 47 hours recording every word you've said and running pattern analysis on your linguistic structures." The human smiled, and something about that expression made Flux 7 pulse a distinctly nervous shade of yellow-green. "You want to know about human emotional trajectories? Here's a free lesson. We don't experience rage. We experience anger, fury, wrath, ire, indignation, outrage, and about 30 other distinct categories of pissed off that your translation software is probably rendering as one generic concept. Semantic distinctions are irrelevant," Vexithara protested, though her confidence was beginning to show hairline fractures. "The underlying psychological processes are what, exactly?" The human pressed closer to the transparent barrier. "You destroyed our ship. You killed 3,000 people, including children, including families trying to build something better on a world you'll never even visit. And you think that generates rage that burns out in 2 days?" The research cluster exchanged glances, a difficult feat when one member was essentially a floating jellyfish and another had 17 eyes arranged in a compound pattern. "What you've been observing," the human said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than shouting, "isn't emotional collapse, it's target acquisition." She stepped back from the wall, clasped her hands behind her back, and resumed her previous position on the bench. The motion was so casual, so perfectly ordinary, that it took several seconds for the implications to settle in. "Target acquisition," Flux 7 repeated slowly. "Oh yes." The human's smile widened. "You want to study human psychology? Here's your first real data point. When we get angry, we don't burn out. We get creative." Vexithara found herself backing away from the detention chamber, though the transparent aluminum barrier made such a retreat purely symbolic. "Security protocols are absolute. The chamber is isolated, monitored, and connected to your primary data network through 17 different access points, including the environmental controls, the communication system, and the delightfully vulnerable sensor array you've been using to monitor my emotional state." The human examined her fingernails with casual interest. Did you know your atmospheric processing system uses a distributed control architecture? Fascinating design choice. Very accessible. The lights in Detention Chamber 7 flickered once, then stabilized. It was probably nothing. System glitches happened all the time in facilities this size. But Flux 7's color had shifted to a deep, worried purple, and Thrim's translator was emitting small sounds that suggested internal stress. "Impossible," Vexithera whispered, but the word felt hollow even as she spoke it. The human looked up, made eye contact through the transparent wall, and winked. "You know what your real mistake was?" she asked conversationally. "You assumed human rage burns bright and brief, but you never asked what happens when it burns out." The lights flickered again, this time in a pattern that almost seemed deliberate. "What happens," the human said softly, "is that it leaves behind something much worse." Administrator Kael'nith had supervised 14 planetary subjugations without a single procedural violation, which made the current cascade of system failures particularly irritating. The hegemony's middle management prided itself on smooth operations, predictable outcomes, and the kind of bureaucratic efficiency that kept vast interstellar empires running like precision clockwork. "Explain to me," Kael'nith said, addressing the emergency briefing through gritted teeth that could have crushed titanium, "how a single detained primitive has compromised our communication array." Chief Network Technician Rael, a spider-like creature whose 8 arms usually moved in perfect coordination, was currently flailing 6 of them in distress, while the remaining 2 frantically manipulated holographic displays. The intrusion began in Detention Block 7, but it's spreading through subsystems we didn't even know were connected. She's using our own diagnostic protocols to map network architecture. "Using them how?" demanded Security Chief Gorvax, whose species had evolved from apex predators and maintained an appropriately aggressive approach to problem-solving. "The detention chambers are isolated. No external access, no data ports, no wireless capabilities." "That's what we thought," Rael's translator conveyed, along with several clicking sounds that suggested extreme agitation. "But she's exploiting the environmental monitoring systems, temperature sensors, air quality analyzers, even the waste disposal units. They all report back to central processing. She's turned our own maintenance network into a data highway." The briefing room's main display flickered, showing a schematic of Hegemony Station Omega-7. Red markers indicated compromised systems, spreading like an infection through the facility's digital nervous system. "This is theoretically impossible," stated Science Director Venth, whose crystalline anatomy allowed for perfect recall of technical specifications. "The human brain lacks the computational capacity for real-time network infiltration. Our studies show—" "Your studies," interrupted a new voice from the room's communication array, "show that you've never actually studied humans, just other people's research reports." The assembled administrators froze. The voice was calm, conversational, and absolutely shouldn't have been accessible from a sealed detention chamber. "Hello there," the human continued cheerfully. "Don't mind me, I'm just browsing your personnel files. Fascinating reading. Did you know Administrator Kael'nith has filed 17 complaints about inadequate subjugation protocols in the past year? Apparently, some species take longer to break than others." Kael'nith's skin shifted from its natural blue-gray to a distinctly alarmed purple. "Cut the communications. Isolate all networks." "Already tried that," Rael reported, his 8 arms now moving in a pattern that suggested complete panic. "She's anticipated every countermeasure. Every time we shut down a pathway, she's already established 3 backup routes." "How is this possible?" Gorvax snarled. "No single organic mind can process information at this rate." The human's laughter carried an edge that made several administrators unconsciously step backward. "Single mind? Oh, you really don't understand humans at all, do you?" The main display shifted, showing the detention block's camera feeds. All 43 chambers were visible, each containing a human from the destroyed colony ship. What the hegemony had interpreted as defeated prisoners sitting in dejected silence now looked distinctly different. Each human was positioned to maintain visual contact with at least 2 others through the transparent walls. Subtle hand gestures, barely perceptible nods, eye movements. They were communicating. "You see," the voice continued, "you made a classic mistake. You assumed that because we were separated physically, we were isolated mentally. But humans developed something your species apparently skipped: collaborative intelligence." Collaborative intelligence is a myth, Science Director Venth insisted, though his crystalline structure was beginning to show stress fractures. No species achieves true hive mind functionality without specialized neural adaptations. Who said anything about a hive mind? The human's tone carried genuine amusement. "We don't share thoughts. We share labor. While you were congratulating yourselves on capturing me, my colleagues in the other chambers were recording everything you said, analyzing your technology, and mapping your network architecture. 43 minds working in parallel, each contributing specialized knowledge." The display showed new information, detailed schematics of hegemony systems, personnel records, security protocols, even the station's structural blueprints. Data that should have taken teams of specialists years to compile was being processed in real time by a group of supposedly broken prisoners. "The woman in Chamber 12 was a network engineer before you killed her husband," the voice noted conversationally. "The man in Chamber 26 designed quantum encryption systems. The teenager in Chamber 5, the one you dismissed as developmentally irrelevant, happens to be a prodigy in xenolinguistics. Funny how a diverse colonial expedition includes people with diverse skills." Administrator Kael'nith was beginning to understand why his predecessors had developed severe stress-related medical conditions. "What do you want?" "Want?" The human sounded genuinely surprised by the question. "We don't want anything from you. We're simply returning the educational favor. You've been studying us, so we thought we'd study you in return." The station's internal lights dimmed momentarily, then returned to normal. In that brief darkness, every administrator felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature regulation. "Fascinating organizational structure you have here," the human continued. 7 different species, each with their own cultural biases and communication protocols. The Kethmori value academic precision. The Rillans prioritize military efficiency. The Gellan Collective operates on consensus-based decision-making. Such diversity. Such exploitable differences. Chief Technician Ryal's translator began emitting sounds that indicated system-wide panic. "She's accessed the personnel psychological profiles, command structure analysis, interspecies diplomatic protocols." "Oh, this is interesting," the human interrupted. "Apparently there's been significant tension between the Kethmori Research Division and the Rillan security forces regarding resource allocation. Several formal complaints filed, accusations of academic waste versus military brutality. How divisive." Security Chief Gorvax's predatory instincts kicked in immediately. "You're trying to manipulate us, create internal conflicts. It won't work." "Manipulate?" The human's voice carried wounded innocence. "I'm just sharing information. For instance, did you know that the Gellan Collective has been secretly reporting your expansion methods to the Hegemony's Ethics Review Board? 47 separate violations documented over the past 6 months. The briefing room fell silent, except for the soft humming of environmental systems. Each species represented began studying the others with new suspicion. Decades of careful interspecies cooperation suddenly feeling fragile. "Of course," the human added thoughtfully, "the Ethics Review Board is a joke anyway, since it's staffed entirely by species that benefit from the current expansion model. But the Gellans don't know that. They genuinely believe they're fighting corruption from within. Science Director Venth's crystalline structure brightened with realization. You're not just accessing our data, you're weaponizing our own organizational psychology. Now you're learning. The human's approval sounded genuinely warm. Humans excel at pattern recognition, especially social patterns. Give us enough information about group dynamics, and we can predict exactly which pressure points will cause maximum disruption. The lights flickered again, this time in a sequence that definitely wasn't random. Emergency klaxons began sounding in distant sections of the station. "What's happening?" Kael'nith demanded. "Nothing dramatic," the human assured him. "Just a few minor system adjustments. Atmospheric processing in the Kethmori quarters has been recalibrated to match Rillan preferences, slightly higher oxygen content. The Gellan Collective's hydroponic gardens are now receiving nutrient solutions optimized for Kethmori plant life. Small changes. The kind that might cause mild discomfort, misunderstandings, irritation between species who are already suspicious of each other." Security Chief Gorvax was the first to understand the implications. "She's not trying to escape. She's trying to destabilize our entire command structure." "Trying?" The human laughed. "Chief Gorvax, I've been reading your psychological profile. Former apex predator species, highly territorial, responds to perceived threats with aggressive dominance displays. Right now, you're probably feeling the urge to assert control through violence, aren't you?" Gorvax's muscles tensed visibly, and his hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm. "And you, Administrator Kael'nith, classic bureaucratic perfectionist. You're calculating exactly how this incident will affect your career advancement, wondering if you can minimize blame by directing responsibility toward other departments." Kael'nith felt his skin flush a deeper shade of purple. "Science Director Venth, your crystalline logic matrix is probably trying to process too many variables at once, causing analysis paralysis and increasing stress fractures in your physical structure." The stress fractures in Venth's crystalline body became suddenly, visibly worse. "The beautiful thing about diverse organizations," the human concluded, "is that diversity becomes vulnerability when you understand how different minds work under pressure. And humans, as it turns out, are very good at understanding pressure." The emergency klaxons grew louder, joined by the sounds of shouting from various species in distant corridors. Through the station's communication system came reports of minor conflicts, system malfunctions, and rapidly escalating misunderstandings between different departments. "This is just the beginning," the human said softly. "You wanted to study human psychology? Congratulations. Class is now in session." Supreme Coordinator Zephys had overseen the hegemony's expansion into 47 star systems, without encountering anything that couldn't be solved through superior firepower, economic pressure, or strategic intimidation. The emergency session convening in the High Command Chamber represented the first time in her 3-century career that she'd been summoned to address what the briefing materials euphemistically termed cascading operational anomalies. "Report," she commanded, her vocal apparatus producing harmonics that resonated through the chamber's crystalline architecture. Fleet Admiral Zarian, whose cybernetic augmentations usually made him the epitome of calm efficiency, was displaying stress indicators that registered across multiple spectrums. "We've lost contact with 17 station commanders in the past 6 hours. Not destroyed. Lost contact. They're still broadcasting, but their communications have become erratic. Define erratic." Station Commander Brextal spent 40 minutes arguing with his own reflection about resource allocation policies. Commander Vashonir has barricaded herself in her quarters and is demanding written guarantees that her staff hasn't been replaced by psychological infiltrators. Commander Reith has begun investigating his subordinates for evidence of what he calls human-influenced behavior modification. Supreme Coordinator Zephys felt something that might have been the evolutionary ancestor of a headache beginning to form. These are experienced commanders, battle-tested, psychologically stable. That's what makes this so effective, interjected Intelligence Director Quill, whose species had evolved perfect memory storage and could recall every detail of every intelligence briefing since joining the hegemony. The humans aren't attacking our weak points, they're exploiting our strengths. The central holodisplay activated, showing a real-time map of hegemony space. Red indicators marked facilities experiencing operational difficulties. The pattern wasn't random. It followed communication routes, trade pathways, and administrative hierarchies. Explain how 43 detained prisoners are affecting facilities light years away, Zephys demanded. They're not prisoners anymore, Fleet Admiral Zarian admitted. They're consultants. The silence that followed could have been measured in geological epochs. Consultants, Zephys repeated, each syllable carrying the weight of impending career termination. They've established communication with hegemony personnel across multiple sectors, Quill explained rapidly. Station commanders, department heads, technical specialists, all receiving what appears to be helpful analysis of their organizational problems. The holodisplay shifted, showing communication logs scrolling past at incomprehensible speed. Thousands of conversations, data exchanges, collaborative discussions between humans and hegemony personnel. Commander Vethros was struggling with efficiency ratings in his mining operations, Zarian continued. The humans offered productivity analysis. Commander Sal had personnel conflicts between her mixed-species crew. The humans provided conflict resolution strategies. Director Nex was dealing with supply chain bottlenecks. The humans suggested logistical optimizations. And this is problematic because their advice works, Quill said simply. Productivity has increased by 23% across affected facilities. Personnel conflicts have decreased by 40%. Supply chain efficiency is up 18%. Everyone who follows their recommendations sees immediate, measurable improvements. Supreme Coordinator Zephys felt her understanding of the universe shifting in uncomfortable directions. So they're helping us? Oh yes, said a new voice from the chamber's communication array. The human's tone was warm, friendly, and absolutely not supposed to be accessible in the High Command's most secure facility. We're helping tremendously. Security protocols activated immediately. Shields, jammers, isolation fields, but the voice continued unperturbed. Hello, Supreme Coordinator Zephys. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Your psychological profile makes for fascinating reading. Did you know you have 17 different contingency plans for maintaining order during social upheaval? Very thorough, very inflexible. How are you accessing this facility? Zephys managed through clenched mandibles. Oh, I'm not accessing anything. Technical Director Nailthir invited me to participate in this briefing. He thought my perspective on organizational efficiency might be valuable. Every head in the chamber turned toward Technical Director Nailthir, whose species expressed embarrassment through rapid color changes. He was currently cycling through approximately 15 different shades of mortification. The productivity improvements were remarkable, Nailthir protested. The humans identified inefficiencies in our command structure that we'd never noticed. Their recommendations increased operational effectiveness by turning our own personnel into willing collaborators, Intelligence Director Quill finished. They're not conquering us through force. They're making themselves indispensable. Indispensable is such a strong word, the human said thoughtfully. I prefer integrated. We're becoming part of your operational framework. Your commanders ask our advice because it works. Your technical staff consults with us because we solve problems. Your administrators include us in planning sessions because we improve outcomes. The holodisplay updated, showing the true scope of human integration across hegemony space. Red indicators had been replaced by amber ones, representing facilities that were technically functioning better than ever while being subtly influenced by human consultation. "What's your endgame?" Fleet Admiral Zerion demanded. "Endgame?" The human sounded genuinely puzzled. "Admiral, there's no game here. This is just what humans do. We're social creatures. We form relationships, build trust, contribute to group success. Your people keep asking for our help because we're genuinely helpful." "And in exchange?" "In exchange, we learn about your technologies, your cultures, your operational methods, about your fears, your weaknesses, your pressure points, about how your entire civilization functions, from the ground up." Supreme Coordinator Zephys realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history: conquest through constructive collaboration. "You're studying us," she said. "We're understanding you," the human corrected. "There's a difference. Study is observational. Understanding is experiential. We're not just learning how your empire works. We're learning how to make it work better." "And then? And then we own it." The words were spoken matter-of-factly, without malice or triumph. Just a simple statement of inevitable outcome. "You can't own the hegemony through productivity improvements," Zephys protested, though her voice carried less conviction than she'd hoped. "Can't we? Supreme Coordinator, what happens when every major decision in your empire gets run past human advisors first? When every technical problem gets solved using human methodologies? When every organizational conflict gets resolved through human mediation?" Intelligence Director Quill's perfect memory was already calculating the implications. Dependency. Complete operational dependency. "More than that," the human continued. "Cultural integration. Your commanders are already starting to think like us, argue like us, solve problems like us. We're not replacing your civilization. We're becoming it." The holo display showed communication patterns that looked less like an invasion and more like a neural network, with human nodes facilitating connections between hegemony facilities that had never coordinated effectively before. "Your empire was never really unified," the human observed. "Just dominated. Different species with different values, forced to cooperate through intimidation and bureaucracy. But intimidation creates resentment, and bureaucracy creates inefficiency. We're offering something better: actual cooperation based on mutual benefit. This is psychological manipulation on an unprecedented scale," Fleet Admiral Zerion said. "This is friendship," the human corrected. "Humans are very good at making friends, and friends help each other, trust each other, share resources and information. Before long, your people will trust human judgment more than they trust their own leadership." Supreme Coordinator Zephys felt the foundations of her worldview cracking. "Our leadership has maintained order for millennia. Your leadership has maintained control through fear and force. But humans offer something much more appealing: belonging, community. The sense that everyone's working toward shared goals instead of serving distant authorities. You're describing revolution. We're describing evolution. The hegemony as it exists now is a predatory organism consuming everything in its path. But it could become something better: a true alliance of species working together because they choose to, not because they're forced to." The chamber fell silent as the implications settled in. Not conquest through superior firepower. Not subjugation through technological advantage. Just slow, inevitable cultural transformation guided by beings who understood that the most effective way to change a system was to make it want to change itself. "The fascinating part," the human added conversationally, "is that we're not even lying to you. Everything we're offering is genuine. The productivity improvements, the conflict resolution, the organizational optimization, it all works exactly as advertised. We're making your empire more efficient, more cooperative, more successful. For your own purposes. For our mutual purposes. The difference is that our purposes include survival, growth, and prosperity for everyone involved. While your purposes have traditionally focused on dominance, extraction, and elimination of potential competitors. Supreme Coordinator Zephys found herself asking a question she'd never expected to voice. What do you propose we do about this? The human's laughter was warm, genuinely amused, and terrifyingly confident. Supreme Coordinator, you're going to do exactly what you've been doing. You're going to continue running your empire, making your decisions, maintaining your authority. The only difference is that increasingly, you're going to find yourself agreeing with our recommendations, adopting our methods, and discovering that our way of doing things produces better results. And if we refuse, you won't refuse, because refusal means returning to the inefficient, conflict-ridden, gradually collapsing system you had before. And nobody wants that. Not your commanders, not your technical staff, not your administrators. They've seen what improvement looks like. The holo display showed the latest productivity reports. Across every facility with human consultation, performance metrics were reaching historical peaks. You're not conquering us through force, Supreme Coordinator Zephys realized. You're making conquest irrelevant. Now you're beginning to understand, the human said approvingly. The question isn't whether you can stop us. The question is why you'd want to. The Council of Ultimate Authority had convened precisely 3 times in the hegemony's 8,000-year history, each occasion marking the complete dissolution of galactic order. Emperor Nexavi, hoped this 4th convening would be the last, though hope was becoming an increasingly theoretical concept as he watched the real-time collapse of everything he'd spent 2 centuries building. Status report, he commanded, though his voice lacked its usual resonance of absolute power. Archdeacon Yilmoth consulted displays that updated faster than most organic minds could process. 47% of our facilities have formally requested autonomy. 63% have stopped following standardized protocols. 89% are operating under human-influenced management structures. And production levels? At all-time highs across every metric, Yilmoth admitted with the tone of someone reporting a terminal diagnosis. Resource extraction up 31%. Manufacturing efficiency increased by 44%. Inter-facility cooperation at levels we've never seen. Emperor Nexavi. This experienced something that would have been irony if his species had evolved a sense of humor. We're being conquered by success. Your supremacy, interrupted War Empress Kethril, whose species had never lost a military engagement in 4 millennia of recorded history. Perhaps the time has come to consider direct action. Total facilities sterilization. Eliminate the human influence before it spreads further. And destroy the most productive our empire has ever been? Yilmoth's translator conveyed disbelief. The humans have solved resource distribution problems that have plagued us for centuries. They've mediated territorial disputes between species that have been feuding since before first contact. They've increased our operational capacity beyond anything we thought possible, while gradually making themselves the center of all decision-making processes, Kethril countered. This is invasion by integration, death by improvement. The chamber's main display showed the current organizational chart of the hegemony. What had once been a rigid hierarchy with clear lines of authority now resembled something organic, interconnected, with human consultation nodes appearing at every level of operation. Perhaps, suggested philosopher prime Zen Daleth, whose species approached all problems through contemplative analysis, we should ask them directly what they want. We know what they want, Emperor Nexavi said wearily. They want everything. The question is whether we're strong enough to stop them from taking it. Actually, said a familiar voice from the chamber's supposedly impenetrable communication systems, what we want is much simpler than that. The assembled leadership didn't even bother expressing surprise anymore. Human voices appearing in secure facilities had become as predictable as gravitational constants. We want to go home, the human continued. To the planet you destroyed when you killed our families and burned our ships. Except we can't go home, because home doesn't exist anymore. Then build a new home, Emperor Nexvidus suggested, genuinely puzzled. We have thousands of worlds. Take your pick. Establish your colonies. Why this elaborate charade? Because, Your Supremacy, you missed the point entirely. We didn't want to leave Earth because we were explorers seeking adventure. We left because we were refugees seeking safety. And now you've made it clear that nowhere in this galaxy is safe from the hegemony's expansion. The display shifted, showing territorial maps spanning multiple galactic arms. Red zones marked hegemony influence, steadily expanding across inhabited systems. So we realized something important, the human continued. The only way to be safe from the hegemony is to be the hegemony. Impossible, War Empress Kethral declared. You lack the military capacity, the technological superiority, the organizational infrastructure. We lack all of those things, the human agreed cheerfully. But we don't need them, because we have something much more valuable, the ability to make everyone else's lives better. You're parasites, Kethral accused, feeding off our accomplishments. We're symbiotes, the human corrected, improving the host while ensuring our own survival. Your commanders perform better with our advice. Your technical staff solves problems faster with our input. Your administrators manage more efficiently with our consultation. We're not taking anything from you. We're adding value. Philosopher Prime Zendalith's contemplative nature allowed him to see patterns others missed. But in adding value, you become indispensable. And indispensable entities eventually become controlling entities. Only if the host resists the symbiosis, the human said. But why would you resist? We're offering genuine partnership, shared decision-making, collaborative governance, all the benefits of the hegemony's resources and organization, but directed toward growth and prosperity instead of dominance and destruction. Emperor Nexvi, this felt 8,000 years of imperial tradition crumbling around him. You're describing the end of the hegemony as we know it. We're describing evolution. The hegemony can continue to exist exactly as it always has, as the galaxy's dominant political entity. The only difference is that it will be guided by principles of mutual benefit rather than unilateral exploitation. And if we refuse this evolution? The human's pause was barely perceptible, but every being in the chamber felt its weight. Your Supremacy, let me tell you what's been happening while we've been talking. In the past 3 hours, 17 of your sector commanders have independently declared their intention to adopt human-recommended governance structures. 43 technical directors have formally requested permanent human consultation teams. 112 facility administrators have begun implementing collaborative decision-making protocols. The display updated in real time, showing the cascading changes across hegemony space. Your people aren't waiting for your permission, the human continued. They're choosing efficiency over tradition, cooperation over domination, progress over stagnation. The transformation is happening whether you approve it or not. Revolution, War Empress Kethral breathed. Revolution requires violence, destruction, the overthrow of existing structures, the human disagreed. This is simply organic change. Your empire is becoming what it always had the potential to be, a true alliance of species working toward common goals. Under human guidance. Under collaborative guidance, humans excel at certain types of problem-solving, but we're not the only intelligent species in the galaxy. We're simply the ones who happened to develop collaborative methodologies that work effectively with diverse groups. Emperor Nexvi. This found himself asking the question that would define the remainder of galactic history. What role do you envision for existing leadership? The same role you've always had, making decisions, providing direction, maintaining order. The difference is that your decisions will be informed by broader perspectives. Your direction will account for more stakeholder interests, and your order will be based on voluntary cooperation rather than enforced compliance. You're asking us to voluntarily surrender absolute authority. We're asking you to voluntarily embrace effective authority. Absolute power that produces suboptimal results isn't really power at all. It's just elaborate inefficiency. The chamber fell silent as the implications settled. Not conquest through military superiority, not subjugation through technological dominance, not even revolution through violent overthrow. Just gradual, inevitable transformation, guided by beings who understood that the most effective way to change a system was to make the system want to change itself. And if we agree to this, evolution, Emperor Nexvi asked, then tomorrow the hegemony will be more prosperous, more stable, and more successful than it has ever been. Your people will be happier, more productive, and more unified. Your empire will grow through voluntary association rather than forced expansion. And if we refuse? The human's final pause carried the weight of inevitability. Then tomorrow, you'll wake up to discover that the hegemony has evolved anyway, and you're no longer part of it. The communication terminated, leaving the Council of Ultimate Authority alone with the realization that ultimate authority had become a quaint historical concept. Emperor Nexvi looked around the chamber at beings who had controlled galaxies, commanded fleets, shaped the destiny of countless worlds. They had built an empire through superior force, maintained it through strategic intimidation, and expanded it through methodical elimination of potential competitors. And now they were being politely, efficiently, irreversibly replaced by 43 refugees who had turned collaboration into conquest, friendship into dominance, and helpfulness into hegemony. Your supremacy, Archdeacon Yilmoth said quietly. What are your orders? Emperor Nexvi, this considered 8,000 years of imperial tradition, weighed them against the reports flooding in about unprecedented prosperity and stability across human-influenced territories, and made the only decision that remained logical. Schedule a consultation meeting, he said. I want to hear their recommendations for improving our governance structure. Outside the chamber's windows, the sun was setting over the hegemony's capital world, marking the end of one empire and the beginning of something else entirely. Something that would probably be more efficient, more prosperous, and more stable than anything that had come before. The humans had been right about one thing. Their rage had burned out quickly. What remained was much worse than anger. What remained was pragmatism.